Hello, everyone. I'm an extension associate now on agricultural economic departments, and actually it's already a year since I've done my first webinar regarding the impact of the war on Ukrainian and global ag markets. Today we are going to discuss the latest changes that happen in the Black Sea region, the influence of EU bans of agrarian export from Ukraine, spring sowing campaign challenges and estimates, grain production and export both from Russia and Ukraine. Unfortunately, the war is continue to make a great impact of our economy, and it is already a year and 2 months of full-scale Russian invasion to Ukraine, and total amount of damage caused by Russia's war to Ukrainian economy during the full-scale invasion has increased to $144 billion as replacement cost. Damages to housing, infrastructure, educational facilities, energy system, transport, trade, and healthcare continue to grow. The amount of damage from destruction of housing stocks remains at the level of $53 billion. Over 150,000 houses, residential buildings, including private and multi-apartment buildings, were damaged or destroyed. After the year of full-scale war, damages to infrastructure are estimated $36.2 billion. More than 25,000 kilometers of state and local roads, as well as 344 bridges and overpasses were destroyed or damaged. 78 bridges have been restored. Most of them were restored in Kiev region, 20 of 24 objects, and Chernihiv region, 20 of 27 objects, and also in 2023, 2 bridges in Mykolaiv and Kharkiv region were restored. The amount of damage caused to forests of Ukraine has been added for the first time to this calculation. It is estimated $4.5 billion. The amount of damage caused to agricultural complex has increased to $80.7 billion. The highest value of damage is in the ag sector, was caused by the damage and theft of agricultural machinery, which is estimated over $4.65 billion. In total, 110,000 units of agricultural machinery were lost as a result of the war. The second largest category of damages is related to destruction and theft of manufactured goods. More than 4 million tons of finished agricultural products were destroyed and stolen. The total value of these damages is estimated at $1.87 billion. The storage capacities of destroyed granaries is 8.2 million tons, and 3.25 million tons of the damaged granaries totally is 11.45 million tons. The cost of repairing the damaged facilities is estimated at $1.33 billion. Top 5 regions that suffered the most from the Russian invasion in terms of the number of damages and destroyed assets are Luhansk, Kherson, Donetsk, Kharkiv, and Zaporizhia region. The black, extremely fertile soil was always the greatest wealth of Ukraine and the main mean of production that ensured high profitability of the agricultural sector. Unfortunately, 20% of Ukrainian arable land is still under occupation or damaged. 17.4 million hectares of Ukrainian territory are polluted with explosive objects. This is like a half of the territory of Japan, or 1.5 Greece, or double territory of Austria. Only 57,000 hectares of agricultural land was inspected and cleared. 5 million hectares of farmland is still considered mined. With the arrival of spring and the beginning of the agricultural season, the risk of explosion increases since farmers are starting going to the field more often. Significant part of the occupied areas, even if it would be mined, will be still not suitable for agriculture due to the physical damage from explosions, chemicals, petroleum, and heavy metals left in soil. It is necessary from 10 to 30 years to restore the soil fertility and return it to agricultural turnover. Despite the war, Ukrainian agriculture remained the main driver of national economy. Although we lost some of our position on world ag market, Ukraine is still top 10 in many spheres. Unfortunately, on sunflower oil market, where we always held the lead, we became second. Russia exported 3.7 million tons of sun oil, only 50,000 tons more than Ukraine, and 600,000 more than Russia exported last year, raising questions about its origin. Ukrainian export on sunflower oil was 815,000 tons less than in previous year. The main reasons of decrease are logistics, storage capacities, and power. It was easier to export sunflower seeds rather than crushing them for oil. That is why we rose from 4 to first place in the world sunflower market. Due to the destruction to Ukrainian industries, the share of agricultural export in total export increased for 13%, although the revenue from ag export decreased by $4 billion. The share of ag export to Europe increased from 27.7 to 55.2%. The share of Ukrainian ag export to Middle East underwent minor changes, but to Africa and Asia declined almost twice, and to Southeast Asia for 2.5 times. Under the limited access to the Black Sea, Ukraine was forced to look for new alternative ways through the new ports and land borders with neighboring EU countries. Railway transportation has been steadily increasing. However, it's further growing is pretty limited by the capacity of railway border crossing and the difference in gauge width in Ukraine and the European Union. After the launch of the grain corridor, 71% of the commodities was shipped by rail to ports and 29% to land crossing. Since November 2022, cargo volumes have been declining due to the constant shelling of energy infrastructure because our trains are mostly electrical, and also slow down of operation of terminal. The capacity of the new ports increased. Currently, they're able to transship around 1.8 million tons of grain per month, and together with railway and trucks, they ensured in March over 3 million tons of Ukrainian grain export. Due to limitation of grain shipment via seaports, the share of grain delivered by land transport has significantly increased, and the diversification of transportation affected the geography of export. Romania, Spain, Poland, Italy, Hungary entered the top list of Ukrainian wheat importers. Turkey became the leader in the current season. Unfortunately, our wheat export to Indonesia and Egypt declined more than 7 times. China is still our biggest buyer of corn, but it decreased by 1/3. China would probably happy to replace this amount with corn from Russia that can be delivered across the land border, but Russia is not as such great producer and exporter of corn as Ukraine. Instead, we delivered more than 3.5 million tons of corn to Romania. Also, another European countries appeared on the list: Poland, Hungary, and Germany. On the barley market, again, new players are on Ukrainian market, Romania and Spain, but we lost our main market in China. Our export to China for now less by 12 times. On a sunflower oil market, Europe is traditionally the leader of Ukrainian export, but our second target market, India, declined purchase of sunflower oil for 40%. Instead, we have got new market in Turkey. So the bulk of the volume of exported grain to European Union was intended for re-export, since EU is traditionally a competitor for Ukraine on the world grain market. And before the war, EU usually had quotas and tariffs for many different ag products imported from Ukraine, such as corn, wheat, barley, honey, sugar, grape and apple juices, processed tomatoes, stretch, butter, poultry, etc. Many. But in difficult time for Ukraine, good partnership relations allowed us to work beyond typical competition. A year ago, European Commission lifted all quotas and tariffs to support Ukraine. This really helped Ukraine to empty our storage capacities and cover at least part of the production cost for farmers. But unfortunately, Ukrainian grain overflooded European market, which caused a drop in prices, decreasing profitability on a European farmer. Ukrainian wheat export did not affect much European market, but EU already exported 7 million tons more of corn since the beginning of the season compared to the previous marketing year, and 4 million tons more of rapeseed. As a result, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and Bulgaria temporarily stopped Ukrainian import of specific ag product, but it is not limited for transit. Actually, the share of ag export to Poland and Hungary reached 14% of all Ukrainian ag export in the first quarter of 2023. So on April 15, a ban on the import of agricultural products from Ukraine to Poland was introduced. Ukrainians were, of course, shocked with the decisions of our friend, but we understand that they need to protect their farmers and their economy. After a number of negotiations, the transit through Poland to third countries was resumed. And here is the list of ag products prohibited for import, among them grain, sugar, fruit and vegetables, meat, but no oil commodities. Poland will apply additional control to transit through its territory. Slovakia followed Poland and also introduced a ban on the import of agricultural products from Ukraine. The ban will not apply to goods transiting through the territory of Slovakia. All categories for transit must be, all cargoes, for transit must be sealed. Not all grains are prohibited for import, as well as oil and meat. Since the beginning of the war, 80% of Ukrainian ag produce is transported in transit through Romania. In second place is Poland 10%, and the smallest transit is carried out through Hungary about 5 to 6%, and Slovakia 1.5%. Romania is still negotiating possibility of ban for Ukrainian import, but no decision has been made yet. Hungary has much smaller border with Ukraine, but it was highly critical and specific in their list of produce prohibited for import and very strict procedure for transit. They even don't allow transloading on the warehouses, only on a railway border crossing, which is necessary due to the difference in track width. Hungary is actually not the greatest producer of grain, and they were interested in grain from Ukraine, but Russia has a big influence on Hungary. It is very possible that Hungary made such a choice under the influence of Russia, just it is constantly blocks all decision of the European Commission regarding aid to Ukraine and sanctions against Russia. Similar situation with Bulgaria. Ukraine don't have any borders with Bulgaria and does not export much to Bulgaria. For the last 3 years, we exported not more than 65,000 tons of grain totally. So Ukrainian export doesn't hurt it at all. But Bulgaria has an access to the Black Sea and allowed Ukraine to use their terminals for transshipment. Unfortunately, Bulgaria is also very pro-Russian state, and Russia wished to limit Ukrainian export as much as possible using all levels of influence. So Russian invasion to Ukraine immediately provoked food inflation, made food unavailable and not affordable for millions of people in import-dependent countries. We observed several price jumps since the beginning of the war. Now, in general, they have decreasing tendency. Today's prices for wheat, barley, and corn are even lower than a year ago, before the war started. But low market prices make farming non-profitable, especially with high inputs cost. We also had a gap in between Ukrainian and world prices for grain. They have now leveled off somewhat. As an example, wheat was sold on different markets for $275 to $279 per ton during last week. But now everyone is expecting a price increase as some European countries has introduced ban on Ukrainian egg import. And if other EU countries follow this idea, the prices will rise, which is not bad actually for farmers who will gain from higher prices. The only issue is to find another buyers. With European support, Ukraine exported after the war began more than 3 million tons of grain and legumes, and ended up marketing year 21-22 with 48 million tons. In current marketing year, we are way behind of our export potential. Last year, we had huge ending stocks, especially of corn, which is normally harvested by late November. Now we are still trying to empty some of our storage facilities from previous year. So since July 2022, Ukraine exported almost 38 million tons of grain and legumes totally, including almost 15 million tons of wheat. Of course, March 2023 is much better than a year ago when our export was almost zero, but it is still less than our pre-war monthly export capacity. For the year of the war, Ukraine exported more than 58 million tons of agricultural commodities. Corn is dominating in structure of Ukrainian export, 25 million tons, which is mostly from the previous year harvest. Wheat export share is twice less than corn. Sunflower oil export is on the third place. Export of all commodities has increased from August, when the Black Sea Grain Initiative was implemented, but there were several downturns associated with Russia's constant blockade of the grain corridor, especially when it became necessary to negotiate the agreement for another term. This next diagram clearly shows the dynamic and the structure of Ukrainian egg export by types of transportation before the war and since the beginning of the war. As I mentioned, railway and road delivery started to play more significant role, and totally during the war we exported via ports 4.6 million tons of egg products. So the export capacity actually of three Odessa ports that unblocked is minimum 6 million tons of grain per month. In March, we exported almost 5.6 million tons of agricultural commodities, but this amount also includes the exports through the new Privas, which is around 1.8 million tons monthly. That means we are still do not meeting our full capacity in those three ports. So problems in the work of the grain corridor are caused by significant delays and sabotage of the order of the vessel inspection by the Russian side. Dozens of bulkers are waiting for many days in both directions from and to Ukraine, and there are days when not a single ship leaves the port. So Black Sea Grain Initiative was hardly extended for another 120 days. On March 18, Russian side insist on sanctions lifting from agricultural products and fertilizers export and from payment system. So currently the grain corridor is valid until May 18, after which there are several scenarios. First, direct continuation of the grain agreement. Second, Russia's withdrawal from the initiative and Ukraine's launch of an alternative plan for which preparation began back in the fall. It provides for the functioning of the insurance fund, as there will be high risk for ship owners, and Ukraine will try to go by ship without inspections. And third scenario, if the above mentioned scenario fail because provocations occurred and ship owners are not ready to enter our port, then we will only have the options of exporting through friendly European countries and the new Priva. Therefore, if the grain corridor is stopped, exports by European Union countries are extremely important, and it is necessary to find compromise solutions now. Actually, currently, Euro Commission allocated more than 56 million euros as aid to the affected countries, in particular Poland, Bulgaria, and Romania. At the same time, Russian Foreign Ministry noted that without solving systemic problems such as connection Rossельхозbank to SWIFT, resuming supplies of agricultural machineries and spare parts, lifting restrictions from insurance, there is no need to talk about extending the deal after May 18. So as of April 24th, more than 1,000 shipment of almost 29 million tons of grain and other foodstuff left Ukrainian ports, and among them a half is corn, 27% is wheat, 5% each sunflower seeds and meal, and roughly 1 ton of each rapeseed and barley. The geography of Black Sea Grain Initiative supply is expanding. Turkey is still the lead in terms of the number of arriving vessels due to their role in this agreement, and smaller bulkers can more often go back and forth to Turkey. Next is Spain, then China and Italy. In terms of tonnage, China became a leader with more than 6.7 million tons of delivered grain. Even the total export to China decreased significantly. Then Spain with more than 5 million tons, Turkey almost 3 million tons. Totally 46% of Ukrainian agricultural products within Black Sea Grain Initiative were delivered to Asia Pacific regions, 42% to Europe, and 12% to Africa. At the same time, Russia reports extremely high harvest and consequently extremely high grain export. They already announced that grain export in this marketing year, July 22, April 23, will be amounted to 50.8 million tons, which will be an absolute record for Russia. For an incomplete season, Russia exported more grain than for entire last marketing year, when 44.2 million tons were exported. Regarding wheat, Russia reports that its export in July, April 22-23 will be amounted 42.3 million tons, which is almost 11 million tons higher than a year ago. In general, for entire agricultural year, wheat export will amount to 47 million tons or more, which makes share of Russian wheat around 23% of the global market. The export of barley from Russia has already amounted to 3.6 million tons against 2.74 million a year ago, and the total potential, they think it would be 5.7 million tons, which is 2.3 million higher than the level of previous year. The export of corn has already amounted 1.9 million tons against 1.7 million tons a year earlier. The potential of the 22-23 season is 4.5 million tons, or just 700,000 tons more than in previous year. Totally, the export potential of Russian grain, including legumes and flour, is estimated in this marketing year at the level 60,450,000 metric tons. That is according to the Russian statistics. So the top 5 important countries of Russian wheat as of the end of March 23 include Egypt, Turkey, Kazakhstan, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. The third place is occupied by Kazakhstan, which imported over 2.4 million tons. Saudi Arabia multiplied import twice to 2 million tons, and for the first time, Algeria has approached the top list with 1.6 million tons of Russian wheat have already been delivered since the beginning of the season. Russia expects a reduction of the anomaly high production from 158 million tons in 2022 to 127 million tons in 2023, which is 20% lower. Of course, the burned Ukrainian land in the occupied areas is mostly unsuitable for agriculture, and there is no more grain to steal, and no one wants to farm there for occupiers. So that is why the expected harvest would be much lower. In general, Russians expect slight decrease in grain crops area by 1.3% from 47.5 million hectares in 2022 to 46.9 million hectares in youth season. At the same time, Russian Minister of Agriculture doesn't hesitate to declare that the sown area under all crops, considering occupied Ukrainian territories, will be 85 million hectares in 2023. The average grain yield in 2023 is expected at the level of 2.73 tons per hectare, which is 16% lower than in 2022, with a record 3.23 tons per hectare. For comparison, Ukrainian average yield last year, even under the war, was 4.88 tons per hectare. So according to the preliminary data from Russian statistics, the wheat harvest is projected at 81.5 million tons, less for 13 million tons to previous year. Barley, 18.7 million tons, less for 5 million tons, and corn, 14.2 million tons. Despite a significant increase in grain consumption in Russia and record export, the level of ending stocks for grain and legumes in this season will reach almost 23 million tons. This will provide a backlog for export in the first half of 23-24 season, despite the significant reductions in the harvest this year. So grain export from Russia in marketing year 23-24 is expected at the level 56 million tons, including 45 million tons of wheat. So let's return to Ukraine, where we are now. The sowing campaign of winter crops was passed with significant reduction in sown area. 5.5 million hectares of winter crops were sown, which is 40% lower compared to the previous year. The regions that were liberated have more critical reduction area in winter crops. Agricultural producers have to adjust their work in the conditions of looting of the material and technical base, stolen and or destroyed equipment, destroyed elevators, lack of finance and labor. Sowing campaign, spring sowing campaign just started, and according to the preliminary estimate, the sowing area under spring grain and legumes in 2023 will be at least 10% less than in 2022 and 25% less than in 2021. It is expected significant decrease of the corn crops, almost 4 million hectares. At the same time, the total area under oilseeds is projected at 9.3 million hectares, which is 24% more than in 2022 and 7% more than in 2021. So this is the first time that the sown area under oilseeds will be larger than under grain crops. The area under sunflower is planned to be 5.6 million hectares, almost a million more compared to 2021. As for now, less than 10% of planned area has been sown. Totally sown area for winter and spring grain and legumes is expected about 9.5 million hectares, and unfortunately, the sowing campaign for 2023 crops is very complicated and expensive. Its total cost is amounted at $8 billion, including $6.25 billion for spring crops. The prices for inputs have grown due to inflation and limited supply. The highest increase is for fertilizer cost. Considering a 50 to 60% decline in fertilizer application, the expected yield will decrease depending on the region and crop by 10 to 30%. So talking about fertilizers, before the war, Ukraine was plus minus 30% self-sufficient in fertilizer, including 70-75% in nitrogen fertilizers and up to 20% in phosphate and complex fertilizers. The Ukrainian mineral fertilizer market has seen a significant decline in production and import of all types of fertilizers. Before the war, Belarus was the main exporter of fertilizer to Ukraine, and this year it shrunk for 4 times. At the same time, there is a decrease in fertilizer consumption, especially in the frontline areas. This is primarily driven by a steep rise in the prices of fertilizers and soaring prices on the global market, high production costs, complicated access to raw materials, and the war-related logistic issue. They all became key problems. So the cost of plant protection products remain on the most one of the most significant components of production expenses, impacting profitability. But like insufficient funding and very complicated logistic, agricultural producers are forced to reduce the application of agrochemicals by an average of 1/3 compared to standard production technologies. Sales are down in all product categories: herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, disinfectants. So the market decline in volume term is estimated at 25-30%, and in a monetary term at 9%, worth $837 million for imported products in 2022 year. The average price rose by 1/3 compared to the last year. The most rapid growth was shown by imported products. Prices for domestic products increased less significantly, so their share in consumption structure expanded. The structure has changed in the regional perspective, especially in the regions more affected by the hostilities. So the first forecast of grain and legumes balance has been made, and totally we expect to produce 44 million tons of grain and legumes, which is 17% less than previous marketing year. If we will not have more barriers to our export, we expect to end up it with 40. Oh, I'm sorry, there is a mistake. I will change the slide. Something happened. We expect to end up it at least with 40 million tons and have approximately 6.7 million tons of ending stocks. Then our export potential for next year will be around 29 million tons of grain and legumes, which is 27% less compared to current year. At the same time, we expect to harvest 19.8 million tons of sunflower, which is almost twice more than in 2022. So the latest forecast for 2023 was a little corrected, and it is a little bit more optimistic than a month ago. There are several reasons for this. We harvested almost all corn, and there is a slight tendency for price decrease for fertilizers and fuel, and the electricity delivery has been resumed on mostly all Ukraine, and active farmland demining in Mykolaiv, Kharkiv, and Kherson region is going on, but also support of FAO and USAID with seed supplies. For example, FAO is providing 2,000 kilos of seeds to 3,000 farms on liberated or close to active hostility zones for sowing up to 10 hectares per farm, size of which is not exceeded 500 hectares. USAID is also providing fertilizers of 1 ton of ammonium sulfate per farm with a size up to 500 hectares. So 3.76 hectares of winter wheat for 2023 harvest were planted by the end of 2022, and we expect end up totally with approximate 4.1 million hectares, which will give us around 15.6 million tons of wheat. With average domestic consumption minimum 8 million tons, we can be our export can be shrink by half compared to the pre-war level. As I mentioned, after so unsuccessful a year for corn producers, many farmers decided to switch from corn production to oilseeds and other crops. Again, thanks to the help of the US, small farmers will receive corn seeds of the DeKalb brand for sowing up to 15,000 hectares each. In 2023, we expect that corn crops will be sown on the area of 3.6 million hectares. The average forecast for corn production is at the level 18.5 million tons. Actually, Ukrainian Ministry of Agriculture announced a more optimistic forecast recently, and they expect up to 21.5 million tons. So if grain initiative will continue working and Ukraine exports planned 23.5 million tons of corn in current marketing year, then next year our export will be twice less. But it is very difficult to predict right now. There are a lot of uncertainties with regards war development and export possibilities to and through Europe, grain initiative extension, import supply, etc. But we believe in our victory and we hope for the best. So that's it for now. Thank you so much. And if there are some questions, I would be happy to answer.
Questions, if you put the questions in the chat.
There are some I don't see. I think I saw the questions in a registration form, and I decided to cover all those questions already.
And so maybe a couple takeaways. When is the next big decision with regards to the export corridor, Antonina, that the market should be thinking about?
The grain corridor is due May 18, and looks like Russia is not really willing to continue it again because they want a lot of sanctions be lifted. So we'll see how it will go. Now with this all European ban to agricultural export from Ukraine, Russia started to use this idea how to influence world, saying that they can be much greater exporter than they are.
Antonina, this is Dan O'Brien.
Yes.
I note that China's bought the grain that has been shipped or exported by Ukraine, that China's been a very active buyer. How does that grain move? Is it still via port, or does it go over land by rail, or what's the means of transportation? If you went by rail, you'd go through contested territories. So no doubt it's by port. Is that correct?
Do you mean Russian or Ukrainian?
Ukrainian grain going to China.
Oh, no, the Ukrainian grain that goes to China is definitely through ports. Russian grain can go across the border, and this is actually what they do to avoid some sanctions. And the same, we call this gray export to Kazakhstan, is happening all the time, that they just go through the land border.
And this is, I'm not close to that situation like you are at all, but I would think that since Russia and China are close cooperators in a number of issues, that if their ships come in, they might stand less risk, perhaps, if they're identified than maybe others would. But just a thought.
Yeah, it could be, but China has their own policy that is not sometimes understandable for others.
There's a couple questions that have come into the chat. There's one, the grain corridor was stopped today on orders of the Ukraine Navy. Were you aware of that, Antonina? And do you have any comments on that?
I don't think so. That is kind of disinformation is for me. I need to learn maybe more, but I never heard that.
That must have just come out. I hadn't seen that either. So interesting.
And then one from Willie Myers. It seems that the EU has provided or will provide extra support to EU farmers. So
Yes.
Will this reduce the complaint about the Ukrainian exports?
Yes, yeah, that's true. European Commission, as I mentioned already, proposed some monetary support to those farmers, and I know that they are going to provide more support to European farmers to cover their losses because of such a huge Ukrainian import. But it is more important for us to keep the grain moving also out of Europe, because we are using their transit to reach ports in Black Sea, but also in Baltic Sea. So for us, it's really important to go through their territory to reach other alternative ports.
And kind of over the year, you kind of talked about the inefficiency because of different rail gauges. Is this being more efficient now, or is it just a six nightmare with regards to meeting the trade?
The situation improved a little bit, so we have now like joint hubs, for example, with Poland, where all the inspections would go faster at the same time, like Ukrainian and Polish customs. Also, we increased the quantity of the wagons, but still we have the project to build new railroad in Ukraine, at least in a western part, more close to the Europe, just to improve this shipment of grain from Ukraine to Europe. But it's still just plans, nothing started yet.
With regards to military operations, perhaps commencing in May. From your reading of Ukraine and Russia news, what are your thoughts with regards, if you have any? And
this is not really my field of expertise, and I know that there are a lot of talks about this counterattack and major military operation. I don't have much information on that, but it definitely will make some probably more optimistic forecast for our grain market. But again, even the territory will be liberated, it will still not really suitable for agriculture for several years.